How's everyone doing tonight? Good. My name's Andy Roddick. I used to play tennis, and now I do this. It's been a long fall. Appreciate you guys being with us tonight. This is Served podcast. So what you're participating in now will run Tuesday morning. Be listened to by a couple 100,000 people by the end of next week. So thanks for being a part of it. We have a great show for you tonight. Really fun guest, which I don't think anyone knows about yet. Off the top, we normally talk about kind of life things. Question: if you travel for, let's call it like less than 3 days, how many of you check a bag?
Three people.
So we basically...
There's 100 people in here.
There's 100 people in here, and 3 people. Sophie and Techie Sean are part of our team. She's hiding.
Sean's up there.
And
Everybody look at him.
with the recent information from the audience, I think I would be hiding too if I were you. So apparently our team of talented people under 30 feel the need to check a bag for like a 2-night trip, and I think it's absolutely insane to the point. And I thought and they were arguing so vehemently for it that I thought I was actually insane. So. John Wertheim to my left, give it up. Long time, and one of the best tennis journalists. You may have seen him on 60 Minutes. No, this is not the biggest show that he does, but always happy to have him. Producer Mike down at the end makes the.
This is the biggest show that.
This is definitely the biggest show that he does. But basically, I get looked at like I'm a crazy person when, like when you travel with people, you kind of get to know them a lot better. Right? Because it's like, are you traveling with someone who all of a sudden decides they need to go get a Chick-fil-A sandwich 5 minutes before you board? Right? Or get a cup of coffee when you've been sitting at the terminal, for an hour and a half, and like last minute something has to happen. You kind of like learn something about people. I'm telling you, the returns on our youngins on our team is not good. I'm very, very unimpressed. I thought it was going to be more. I be honest. I was hoping for more hands, not because I wanted to be wrong, just because I was hoping it wasn't going to be such a bloodbath of a discussion.
Yeah, I'm just curious. Is it all the liquids that they bring? Like Sean, is it hair product?
That was my wife Brooke's point. Is it like the shampoos and the other things? And is that a possible thing? And I guess in the most guy response ever, I'm like, do they not have shampoo anywhere else in the world? Like, is that? And I guess it's particular. But JW, we just basically, I don't know. I want to see if you're on our side or if you're also a psychopath. But Mike and I are clearly on the side of check a bag. Sophie's made the mistake when traveling she was traveling with my wife Brooke and our 2 kids for our U.S. Open show, and all of a sudden we get there, kids, after a day of travel, ticking time bombs are 9 and 7. They're good travelers, but it's a wild card. Completely. She checks a bag. It takes 35 minutes, and it's like then are we the buttheads if we decide that we need to get to the city a little sooner and leave her behind? Unfair, if you ask me. It's an unfair position to put us in. You're the tie-breaking team vote. I mean,
you never check a bag unless you absolutely have to.
Thank you.
For all sorts of reasons. Never take a connection. Never use your miles for domestic upgrade. It's like they're basics, right? It's just like it's a segue to tennis here. It's just like
if you need a focus point for any judgment, Sophie's right there in the back, underneath the brown strap over, just underneath the exit sign. I will tell you, we had a whole show planned, and it was year in review, and we're going to tell you all the cool things that happened in tennis this year, of which there were many. And then I kind of threw in a prayer of an email to tonight's guest, and the entire show went out the door because this is just way more fun, way more important. We'll be the best player that we've ever had on our podcast, which is very cool. Has a lot of business going on at the beautiful Baha Mar, of which Mike and I normally do the show in my gym at home.
I'm very glad not to be in your gym.
And here we are at the beautiful Baha Mar
Smells a lot better.
Resorts.
Smells a lot better here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Enough. John McENROE is our guest tonight, everyone. It's going to be really cool. So I can go through all the accolades. 77 singles titles, 77 doubles titles on tour, 7 singles majors. Has been the voice of most of the matches that we've watched for the better part of 3 decades. So, hands together for Mr. McENROE, which is pretty cool for a surprise guest. I said, like, this is actually beneath you. You're the best player we've had on our show. This is I don't know.
I kept waiting for the call.
Coming up on a year, but the good news is, because this is extremely charitable of you, I think you can actually get a tax write-off for like the next week of your life, regardless of what you spend. Anyway, so one of the questions, Mac, that my mind immediately jumped to, in this kind of age of the giants, right, of the big three, there really aren't any stats left that were kind of established before the Roger Rafa Novaks.
Enough about them. Let's talk about me.
We're going to.
I've heard about them for the past 20 years.
You're going to love this segue. You're going to make me look good here in a second.
All
but there is one that is hasn't been broken. I don't think it will be broken. The all-time win percentage on the men's tour for a single season. So if we talk through the best years of all time, right? You have Roger 05, Roger 06, Novak 11, Novak 15. Obviously, Rocket Rod Laver, who I believe was your idol, was obviously won the Grand Slam. But no one's ever had a higher win percentage in the history of tennis than this man to my left. In 1984, went 82-3 over the course of an entire season.
I threw 2 of the matches.
For us normies, and on this podcast, we talk about stuff that I can identify with a little bit more readily, which is like the struggle of trying to beat people like you. But I'm kind of fascinated how greatness at that level sustains itself over a 52-week calendar. What did it feel like from the outside looking in, and stories we hear, and when these years are talked about, I'm going, okay, you're floating on air. You know exactly what your product's going to be when you're going into a match, and it's up to someone to do something kind of otherworldly to get in the way. Is that fair? What is it like going kind of end to end with that sort of dominance? What are the stressors? What are the things that became easier for you that year?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on your podcast. Yeah. As far as that particular year, that was sort of a culmination of like 3 or 4 years, really, because I had a couple great rivals. Obviously, Bjorn Borg being the top of the list, Jimmy Connors, and Ivan Lendl were the 3 top. At the end of 1981, which is my first year that I finished #1, Bjorn Borg at the end of the U.S. Open, or a month or so after, we were in an exhibition in Australia, and we were having a beer before this press conference, and the late great Vitas Gerulaitis was with me as well, and he said, "I'm going to quit playing." And I was like, "What? What are you talking?" We thought he was kidding. We laughed at first, and then he apparently seemed to be serious, and we were like, "What the hell are you going to do? You're 25 years old." I think he was the first player that could afford to do it, like if he had to, made the type of money where he thought he could live the rest of it. That's if you don't have kids. I got 6 kids, so got to keep working. But what happened is that I actually was it affected me greatly for the better part of 2 years. I didn't perform as well as I would have liked to. And your dream is always to feel like you're bringing your game to that max level where you can do anything and everything at any point. So I was sort of mentally going, keep waiting for him to come back to push me, because I think you've seen with the 3 guys that you were referring to, Roger, Rafa, and Novak, that they made each other better.
Yeah.
You have no choice but to get better. So I finally realized at the end of probably 1983 that he wasn't coming back. And I started to put my head more into okay, you got to max out what you hopefully can do. And it sort of all came together in the beginning of '84, where all of a sudden I felt like my game, for reasons I can't totally understand, lifted up to another level. And I felt like I was playing at a different level than players. And I was actually, people ask me the best match I ever played was when I beat Connors badly in Wimbledon in '84. Was it the match you won in Davis Cup, et cetera? But it was actually some of the smaller events that I felt like I was playing better. So I felt like I had this, that dream come true. I think the mistake that I made after that year was sort of like, instead of, continuing to try to work on my game and improve certain parts of it, that I sort of sat back and sort of said, okay, let's see what other people got. What are they going to do? And I have a lot of respect for the players that don't do that. I look at Novak and Rafa as two obvious examples, even Roger to a degree, where you learn, he got hurt by that high backhand, and so he eventually went to a bigger racket, could handle it. Novak learned to, be more of an aggressive player and necessary. Attack returns. Rafa learned how to serve bigger. So it was a year that I'll never forget. It was incredible. I wish, I backed it up for another 6 months. But, when you got a lot going on off the court, which we don't necessarily need to get into at this time, because this is a PG podcast, that it got more complicated.
It's actually,
we're actually the only podcast with an explicit rating, which is not great. But either way, we're not. We still won't go down that rabbit hole.
So it was something that, became to strive for, but never able to duplicate. But I felt like at least I was able to get to that level where I felt like it all, all that work that I put in over the course of the first 25 years of my life paid off.
So you mentioned you didn't do the things that would have improved you as a player. Because, frankly, if you go 82-3, you're not really sitting back going, I really need to work on that. If you could go back and kind of tell yourself or have a conversation, what would those things have been going into 85?
Improved conditioning, basically is probably the biggest thing, to max out, have to push yourself so that instead of being able to go 2.5, 3 hours, you can go 3.5, 4 hours. My theory was, I trained hard for a cup, really hard for 2-3 hours. And I looked at it like, okay, I'm going to get rid of 80% of the players the first 2 hours. I'm not going to have to worry about them, because I'm going to beat them in that amount of time. So that leaves like 20% of the tour. And so what's going to happen if this goes longer? And that could get to be more problematic, if they could. And I said, look, I compete pretty well. So I'm going to keep battling, even if I'm a little bit tired. But other players, Ivan obviously being the obvious one, trained. I don't know exactly what he did, but he was certainly training as hard as anyone had ever trained on a tennis court, or so it appeared. And that cost me, back in the day, and that was 1984. In 1985, I sort of had set myself up. A lot of things had gone on in my personal life, but I felt like if I won the U.S. Open again, I was going to finish #1 again. And I beat Ivan, the 2 tune-up events, in Toronto and Stratton Mountain. So I felt like I was going to win it again, and that it would all sort of work itself out. And then, in those days, you had to play the semifinals and the finals back to back. So that's where that part could come in, and potentially. I played at 11 the first match. I beat Mats Wilander, who was another great rival of mine, in 5 sets in very hot conditions. The women used to play the finals after that. Connors played Lendl. Connors had sprained his ankle. You ready to make for me to make some more excuses, right? So Lendl only played an hour and 20 minutes. And then I had to come back. I remember that, we had to play the next day at 4 o'clock. And I was like, oh my God. And I woke up, it was pouring rain. Sort of like how it's been here a little bit. Not as windy, but raining. So that was the only match in my life. I don't know how many matches I played, 1,000 matches. The only match in my life where I prayed it would rain. Because normally just, you feel so much stress and pressure and the expectation you're putting on yourself and others put on you wanted to get over with. And I just prayed that one day. I remember watching the Giant game at Meadowlands Stadium, and it was pouring at 2:20, 2:30. I'm like, oh my God. And then the next thing you know, it was like sunny. Yeah. And it was heading towards Flushing Meadow. And I'm like, oh my God. I have
to go do this.
I got to the match, the 4 o'clock match at 20 of.
No, you didn't.
20 or 4.
Has that story gotten better with time?
No. It's gotten worse because I lost. And I was like so rushed. And ironically, I got out in the court and I got up 5-2 in the first set. And I was winning. And I got up out of my chair and I started to walk towards the baseline. And all of a sudden I looked back at the chair and my body was there. I swear to God, I thought I saw my body there. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm completely drained. Like I felt like I had nothing all of a sudden. I lost that match like 7-6, 6-4, 6-3, and lost the #1 ranking because of that. And then there was like that, turning of events. And then all of a sudden you have kids and, that complicates things, how to make that challenge. And, it was an uphill battle for me from there. So that was, a really hard one to take, to have to spend so many years at the end where I kept feeling like I was, close to getting back, but not able to getting over the hump again.
Yeah.
And we're talking 1984. I have a fun fact. John had his year, greatest year ever. And I think Martina that same year was like 78-2. Good year for top players in 1984. But since then,
everyone hated
Why did you have to
lefties.
bring that up?
You have
That should have a better record than that.
it's men and women.
Another one lost.
You've never not been part of tennis since then. I mean, you've been you've been the preeminent broadcaster as soon as you were done playing. When you're watching tennis now, what are you and are you not recognizing? To what extent are you watching the same sport? To what extent are you watching?
Well, the
something you don't
similarity
recognize?
is the mentality, that will, that drive, that willingness to dig deeper and to, if necessary, slightly adjust what you're thinking or what you're doing. And that's what I love watching the great guys play, because you can see them thinking. And the court, I mean, obviously, I don't know why little guys, I'm 5'11" 3/4. Does that round off to 6?
Yeah.
But you see guys, we play. Here's one record I won't ever lose. I'm the last guy ever to win a major with a wood racket. Oh, wow. No one can take that away from me. That's pretty cool. I do not think that will happen again.
That would be a hell of a curveball.
It would be a hell of a curveball. But now you see guys, there's guys 6'6", a lot of guys actually 6'4". You look at what's happened. And they have the technology where the rackets are, there's 40% more power than there used to be. There's strings that have these, ability for the spin that was unheard of when we played. The way they hit the ball, like they taught us a completely different way. So therefore, when I go on Tennis Channel, I try to not do that too often or tell people at ESPN. No, I do it all the time. No, I'm watching because I love to watch it. And occasionally they show some of the old matches. Look like we're in slow motion. I'm like, this is sad. But that's probably the biggest change in terms of the obvious is the quickness of the game, in terms of the speed of the game. But, that doesn't change the fact you need that first explosive step, So it's become more athletic, which is, the next question you're going to ask me is where the next American is. How come
Didn't even
Andy
have that.
Roddick was the last guy to win a major in the men's side. You may have that record for a while. I hope not. We're getting closer.
close.
But the thing is that what happened in the 70s and 80s is there was an explosion of tennis, which I think was incredible. And I was lucky enough to be part of it. But we were on like the front and back pages quite a bit. And we were in this, John, because Sports Illustrated was the magazine to, it was your dream to be on the cover. And we frequently were on the cover. And that was, we believe it or not, in the early 1980s, this sounds laughable, we had the same ratings as the NBA. If you had told me in the early 80s that golf, of all things, would have double the ratings of tennis, I would have laughed at you. The next thing you're going to tell me is pickleball is going to have better ratings. I go on Tennis Channel, some damn pickleball match on. I'm like, oh my God, we're hitting the apocalypse.
Here, I got a question for you, just because that's obviously not written down. I know my response is yes. Would you rather get kicked in the nuts than watch a full pickleball match?
It's a tight one. I could watch some of it.
I don't know. As long as it wasn't
Kicking
like
the nuts hurts.
Yeah, I say yes as long as it's not like full Vinatieri or Grammatica or
maybe
something
singles,
like that.
but Padels is a slight improvement.
Yeah.
But the tennis is the king of all racket sports, and it's been that way since 100 years ago, and it's going to be that way in 100 years. These other things, if hopefully we can all work together and it'd be better for all of us. I know a bunch of old people, not that I'm old or anything, but yeah, I am old. You go, wow, that court's a lot smaller, pickleball. So I think that I'm going to pick that game up. You know who the happiest people in the world are? The
Surgeons.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The doctors. They're making a fortune. So they're the happiest people. The people tearing their Achilles, getting hurt all the time. Even poor Sam Querrey tore his Achilles
as a pickleball player.
Playing pickleball. That serves him right to go from tennis to pickleball.
I was concerned my fall to a podcaster was tragic until I heard that Querrey tore his Achilles playing pickleball.
Yeah. And a golfer who prided himself on, his fitness, which apparently he's been incredible at for many decades, Bernard Langer, who's, still winning most of them, or a lot of the Masters event, the seniors event in golf. He tore his Achilles playing pickleball.
Is that right?
It seems so innocent, doesn't it?
Exactly.
Well, it seems so easy. So that's why after I beat Agassi in pickleball, he won't like hearing that. Andy Roddick beat Michael Chang. That's when we played about almost 2 years ago, I guess.
It was, yeah.
And it came down to the doubles.
Yeah.
And we split the first 2 sets, and it was the final set to 21. So, me and Michael are like, look, Andre's, he's moving better now because he's gotten himself in better and better shape. And Andy was wearing this big knee brace. So we're like, we're going to wear him down and just beat him in the last set. And then right as we're about to go on, they say, we're going to switch it to 15. And then, and again, then at times that we're running late, it's going to be 11. We're like, wait a minute, our strategy's out of the... I'm making that up to some extent. But that's what happened, but we lost 12-10.
Yeah, that was one of the best days of my life. I had this later in the conversation, but it seems relevant on the back of you talking about what's changed in tennis. And I generally think that the best in a certain era would probably figure out a way to be the best or near the best in another era based on problem-solving skills, based on pacing of fitness, based on intensity, intangibles, all the things you were talking about. I think the easiest person to kind of point to is, Andre in '88 using Pro Blend and a graphite racket, and then all of a sudden playing in, 03, 04, making a US Open 05 with full Luxilon in his racket. Am I crazy for thinking that? Is it more nuanced, or do we simply think the best players would have figured out a way to have been the best players?
That's a question that is often asked. It's a great question, and obviously we'll never know the answer to that. But you are probably better able to answer some of these questions because you played these guys many times. You were, top 5 in the world for, 10 years in a row, or top 10. And you had, a history with these players quite a bit. I idolize, you mentioned a few minutes ago, Rod Laver. To me, he was, I try to play like him, do everything like him. He's 5'8", 5'9". In today's game, that's not going to be as easy to deal with. At the other side of the coin, I have a lot of respect for a guy, I don't know how many people know, like David Ferrer or David Nalbandian. I'm going to give you 2 examples of guys 5'9". These guys were great players. Yeah. Andy beat Nalbandian in the semis and was, I believe, down match point in the semis.
When he won the Open.
The year that Andy won the Open. So this guy was a great player. He had unbelievable feel. But, he's 5'9". It caught up to him, I think, a lot quicker. So the answer is they would, but you're not going to tell me that David Ferrer's in the same league as Rod Laver.
No.
But David Ferrer got to 3 in the world. And Nalbandian was 4 or 5
I think
Ferrer
maxed out. Like, I think he hit 10 out of 10 of what he could have done. But, you can't teach 6'6", right? You can't teach, speed on the forehand, the nuance of Roger, the ball speed of a Rafa, the 6'4" nature of Novak, and being able to control the middle like Andre, but also, being able to cover a foot more on each side.
That's the new. That's exactly it. The new 5'11" is 6'2". The new 6'2", 6'5". And so you got guys. Andre was 5'11" and a slightly. He hates to admit it, but he was smaller than me. And Bjorn was slightly smaller than me. And so and all of a sudden you had Pete Sampras was 6'1". Rafa's 6'1", Roger's 6'1". Then Novak was like 6'2", 6'2.5". You're 6'2"? 6'2",
Novak's taller than I am, for sure.
So you're 6'2", he's 6'2.5", maybe 6'3". Murray, the greatest, and you're like, oh my God, they move as great as the guys before. Now you even got Medvedev, these type of guys that's standing 50 feet behind the baseline, willing to run 25% more than his opponent, and standing as far back as you can possibly stand. They're 6'6". Zverev, these guys. Do they have that explosive speed of Carlos Alcaraz? No, because no one does. This guy's the greatest talent that I've seen in the last 20 years. The most pleasure to watch, Carlos Alcaraz, maybe than I've ever seen, certainly at this age. I worry only because he's 6 feet, a half an inch tall, and that these other guys are going to drive him absolutely nuts because he's going to play these guys that just serve out of a mountain. and get frustrated, which is what happens it happened at the end of last year. It's happened on a handful of occasions, and it's going to be tough. He's got to be really strong. Obviously, he's super strong. I'm talking about to get to that, close to that level where these other guys, I mean, if you had told me the three guys 20 years ago would beat Pete, who had, to me was arguably the best player that ever lived, had 14 majors. It took 35 years for him to pass Roy Emerson, that three of these guys would do it, and all three hit 20 or more. I would have said, you're out of your mind. I hope that I'm wrong about Alcaraz, that he's not going to, be able to keep this up as long. I still think he's going to win 10 of them.
Yeah, well,
which would be unbelievable.
Well, to your point with these three resetting the deck completely, I remember being at the U.S. Open in 2022, and Alcaraz, that's where he won his first major. But during the tournament, obviously, he hadn't won a major yet. And I have people coming up to me, and to me asking an insane question, going, is Alcaraz is this guy gonna win 10? And I'm going, we're insane now because of these three people. Like, you're basically asking me, is he gonna win more majors than the following people? Edberg, Becker, McEnroe, Connors, Agassi, one less than Borg. And you're asking it of someone who has yet to win one. Right. That's how insane these guys have made the conversation. He mentioned Pete at 14. Rafa matched him in one slam. Like, think about that for a second. Like, it's just Looney Tunes what these guys have done and what they've done to, like, even affect our, like, we say 20 now. It's like, oh yeah, there's three of them. Like, what? No, that's just bonkers. It's not real life.
Let me ask you about the guy at the top of the heap, who's the most ridiculous one of all. You probably heard Novak Djokovic has a new coach going into this next season. Interesting decision. I'm curious what you think of that, but I also want to ask you, if you had to pick one of your rivals at the tail end of your career to have coached you, who would you have chosen?
I would have picked Borg.
You would have.
Just because we were so tight, and then because he was, one of the greatest physical specimens I ever saw, and he trained exceptionally hard, even when he, because we, in our day we tried to burn the candle a little bit on both ends. We wanted to prove we could stay up late and still win. So it, probably caught up to us a little bit, but we gave it a hell of a shot.
But you probably had more fun than the rest of these guys.
Oh yeah, I certainly hope so. But this is, Andy's searching. And listen, I have 6 kids. He's got four kids, so he's like, I need a break. And he sort of got pushed into retirement, right, in a way, unfortunately, because his body wouldn't hold up. I mean, Murray's an incredible player. He won 3 majors. He's been in 11 Grand Slam finals. He's one of the best players of the last. He's the next guy to me. But unfortunately, with most human beings, unlike Rafa, you see it happen eventually. It catches up to you, and it's hard. It's really hard, when you're still feeling pretty young, and he desperately wanted to play. So I'm happy. I mean, I'm sure this is going to be extremely short-lived, but I just, for tennis, just the interest, that it brings to it, hopefully, around the world, I'm hopeful that, in a way, I hope Djokovic wins it. Because it would, give Murray a little bit. He needs some more positive vibes. And I'm kidding a little bit about him needing to be away from his kids. Everyone's all upset. Like, oh, yeah.
There's the
there's
the headline on Wednesday.
He'll sleep a lot more. Let's put it that way than he would have otherwise. And he certainly knows Novak, and they're both training exceptionally hard. And Novak's always like thinking a step ahead of everyone. Coming up with these crazy ideas. What? You're going to have Murray coach you? Give me a break. But, then you're like, wait a minute. I remember when Murray decided Ivan Lendl was to coach him. And someone came out to me in Australia and they said, did you hear that Andy's hired Ivan Lendl? And I go, oh my God, I cannot freaking believe he hired Ivan Lendl. And they're like, oh my God, this is going to work. And it did. He won all his majors with him.
It's weird. My first reaction was like, I was stunned because you see people go into coaching. It rarely happens essentially straight off of tour, right? He was playing last summer and now he's not. But then the more I thought about it, and maybe I'm just trying to make this work because I want it to work because it would be exciting for tennis. But Novak, it's probably the first time he's going into a year in who knows how long, over a decade or more, where he's not going for sure I'm the best player on earth, right? For sure I'm going to win a major this year, or 2 or 3. And is there any value in Murray having struggled, maybe lost a step with movement, maybe having to problem solve in different ways? And now we can talk about how well he did that with his hip and everything else. But is there a value add outside of, there's only a handful of people on earth that can look at Novak and say, you know what, I think you're actually wrong about your strategy in this matchup, and say it credibly to him. And obviously that's one of the benefits of Murray. Is there any value in Murray, one, knowing the guys that he's trying to beat, obviously Alcaraz and Sinner, I think are the 2 people he's probably training for right now. Is there any value in Murray having had struggled, at least recently, as Novak is kind of trying to maintain his level? Listen, he's getting further away from physical peak than he is closer to it, right?
I think that Murray, I don't think it's so much the fact that he, lost his half step and this is how you deal with it. Because, I don't think that he ever dealt with, what athlete that can deal with that and, succeed at close to the same level? So that's not what he's going to be telling. But he brings the amount of tennis knowledge. This guy's a tennis geek, and he loves it. And he'll leave no stone unturned for Novak, just the way he did for himself. This guy gave 120% of what he could give for what Murray gave it absolutely everything he had. Just think of the pressure he was under when he won Wimbledon. I mean, no British player had won in 76 years, and he won it twice. And he won 3 majors. It was, back in my day, we're like, I hope I play a guy from Britain, man. That's like a good draw. So, just like in Switzerland, Switzerland's got players? Come on.
Yeah,
Mallorca's got a player?
We thought opposite things about playing someone from Switzerland. I'll tell you that right now.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly. Yeah, I know what you're saying, because we didn't think someone like that could come from Switzerland, but he did. So I think Murray's going to bring something to the table, just his mere presence more than anything
Being
else.
able to relate probably to whatever
To relate.
Novak's
He
saying
can
too.
totally relate to everything that's been going on. He's going to, be able to, obviously Novak has a lot of respect for him, so he's going to be able to push him when he needs to. The problem with Novak is not that there's a problem. Is that it's going to be tough because, he wants to just win the majors. And how do you do that when you don't play many tournaments? He's 7 in the world now. He could play Sinner in the quarters. Well, actually, he can't play. Could he play? Could 7 play 3, or is it 7-2? Is it 5, 6, 7, or 8? They just pick it. I thought it was like 1, 2, 7, 8.
Yeah, it's not weighted.
So he could play Alcaraz in the quarters and Sinner in the semis.
Right. Yeah,
the way it is, because he's 7 and Alcaraz is 3 in the world right now. So that complicates things. He's got 2 kids. He's got, he's, as you said, towards the end, you would assume. So it's going to be difficult for him to navigate that, as we saw last year.
Let's talk about, you just finished Laver Cup captaincy with your friend Bjorn. At the beginning of that event, I kind of wrongly rolled my eyes. All we need is another glorified exhibition. Had an argument. I remember having an argument with John Isner where he's telling me the energy is great, and it's as fun as Davis Cup. And I'm going, Davis Cup is this magical thing that I take pride in and hold near and dear to my heart. And, it's our country versus all the other countries. And now I'm like, okay, well, Laver Cup's brilliant because it's the first tennis event that was built backwards from what's the best viewing experience in a 3-day period, right? You can lay people out there, but it was given a lane because Davis Cup was negligent to changing at all forever, right? And now they're stuck trying to change, all in a couple of years. What is your relationship, having been the only person on the planet who's, I think, been Davis Cup captain and Laver Cup captain? What do you see for Davis Cup? I'm hoping you're going to tell me something optimistic, because I think it's kind of near the end, and I think it's just on life support at this moment, versus what do you see for the future of Laver Cup? Can they coexist? What gives?
Well, I'm going to just go back a little bit. When I was a kid, I asked my parents what did they want from me in the sport of tennis, and it was to get a college scholarship and to play Davis Cup. In my day growing up, there was no tennis in the Olympics. There was not nearly as many team events. It wasn't until 1988 to the Olympics tennis came back. I I was fortunate enough to be I'd like to be part of a team. I played other sports. I thought that was awesome to put that USA in your back. It was one of the greatest feelings that I ever had as a tennis player. I know Andy was one of my practice players, my second round as a captain. He was, 17 then? Yep. 16, 17. And so it meant a lot to me. Davis Cup, needless to say, I was fortunate enough to be part of 5 Davis Cup teams that won. I'm going to ask you a question. How many people do you think have come up to me and asked me how many Davis Cups I've won in the last 20 years? You know how many? None. Not one person has come up to me about my Davis Cup experience. So that to me is seriously sad. So that opened the door, obviously, because of, they're just butchering this beyond belief. The tennis authorities unwilling to, make changes that had to be made. The commitment, I lost a bunch of matches going to other countries, Argentina, these other places, but it was awesome to experience that, what it meant for those countries. Laver Cup came about because of Roger Federer, really, basically, and wanting to show his respect for one of our Babe Ruth of tennis, which is Rod Laver. And the idea was to have it sort of like the Ryder Cup in golf, which is, that 1 week, 3-day event that you bring the best of the best. And I think that they did that, and they did that successfully, and the energy has been incredible. Of course, the tennis establishment is trying to ruin that also. Unbelievably. Instead of, backing something that so obviously is a great thing for the players, and it's not you get a lot of money, first of all, and second of all, it counts on your record. It should, it's an argument whether there should be points. You can get, this is an aside, but you get 1,500 points to win the ATP Masters, the ATP Finals, right? We had no points when we played. 0. Is that right? None. Is
that true?
Yeah, it is true. We never got points for that. I
didn't know that.
We did WCT Dallas, which was like a huge thing for us at that time. No points. And so this idea that couldn't be anything without points, I think is wrong. But maybe there should be points if there's 1,500 points for that. But the point is that this should be nurtured, and it should be a great thing. They should give it time, and it's a calendar. But no, they don't do that. They put an event right after or before in China, and then you got to go to the Far East the next week. And so it's really sad to see. Hopefully, people recognize that it's really good for the sport. I was fortunate enough to do it for 7 years. Andre's taken my place. I'm sure Andy will do it probably after him. And it's something that, for that 1 week, is awesome to bring these players together. So it was a great experience. It's fun to be out. It's not, if I can make a 5% difference, slightly more in certain matches, that can make the difference. We were overmatched every year. 9 of the top 10 guys are Europeans.
True.
And then we're out there, playing. But we had a great team spirit, and so I take pride in that. It was tough, but it's an awesome event. So I'm hopeful that, of course, when they saw that, we're going to do our own event 2 weeks before Australia, and we're going to do this and do that. Does anyone care about the event 2 weeks before Australia? Whatever that is.
Well, maybe the people getting paid to play in it.
They don't mind. Yeah. But it's something that the sport of tennis is so fragmented. I've said many times. I wrote a book many years ago, and I've said it many times. And it doesn't have to be me, although I'm available. The sport needs a commissioner of tennis to oversee this sport. It's so fragmented. Who runs the sport? The 4 majors. Why the hell are they running the sport? I mean, they're great events, but they shouldn't be, taking 90%, 85%.
Because they create the most money, like every business who ever creates the most money.
No, they create the most money for themselves. But they need to create more money for the players so that more than 100 players can make it and do well. It's crazy. We get, I believe, 16% of the revenue of the U.S. Open. John, you might know this.
50 is the answer. Your neighbor will tell you. No. Regular team sports about 50-50.
Yeah, it's about 50. We're at 16, and that's 8 women, 8 men.
For context, the NBA went on strike on a 53-47 split. So what he's talking about is a 16% split versus 84%.
They get 84%. Yeah. They're making over $200 million a year, which is great. But they need to spread the wealth, for the players, so that there's pensions for all these players that never got anything, that can't afford it, that have to go into the real world at 28 when they play. The average lifespan of a player is 3 years.
Let me. Can we flip that on?
You want to get more positive?
Yeah, I was going to say let's zig where everyone else is zagging. There are plenty of defects of the sport, but still, you said beats the hell out of pickleball. What in 2024? What you watch a lot of tennis? What are the virtues? What gives you pleasure? What do you think tennis has as a strength
tennis,
right now?
Athletes are, some of the greatest athletes in any sport, because not only do you have to meet a tremendous physical athlete, but more importantly, I believe, the mentality that's needed when you're out there by yourself. This is like, it's something that very few sports can even relate to. And I think that's underestimated and underappreciated, like how difficult it is. I actually disagree with having coaching on the court, them yelling and going over there. I think it's a bunch of bullshit, personally. Is that okay if we say that? Or?
Yeah, say it again. Go for it.
Not PG.
Have a ball.
And it's just it's frustrating to see like us shoot ourselves in the foot. But if that's people like that, I'm okay with it too. I'm not like it's oh my God, I can't work anymore because I see that. But I just don't know why the sport of tennis doesn't understand more of what it needs to do. I mean, I'm a lifer anyway, so I have a tennis academy. I love the sports, but I've been lucky, so I'm going to spend the rest of my life. That's why I'm in Baha Mar. We're going to bring the there's going to be a doubles team, one from Baha Mar and another one from my tennis academy, and they're going to win the Wimbledon doubles. Maybe the U.S. Open.
Wow.
That's like the type of dream that you need to have, and you need to give opportunity to more kids. And so this is an ongoing thing. You got to do more specials on 60 Minutes, John, now that you hit the big time.
We're going to get to the reason why you're here, why you're with us at Baha Mar before the end of the show. You're beating me to the punch on a lot of the questions. You said you're a tennis lifer. The next thing I have circled or drew an awkward square around is that you never left. There was never a period where you kind of, at least post-career, where you got away. It seemed like, and correct me where I'm wrong, but you have people, like a Pete who you never see again. You have a Connors who was gone, and then I kind of dragged him back in for a couple of years, and then he was gone again. Andre was largely out of the tennis eye for a long time, and now he's kind of back fully. You never left. It seems like you made a Wimbledon semifinal in '92, lost to Andre, and then I want to say maybe even the next year, that year, shortly thereafter, you took your seat as the voice of the biggest matches in tennis, and it seemed like a pretty natural transition. And I was going to say, a lot of people will show up for events, they'll commentate, but you still have your academy. You still care about kind of the micro issues of tennis. You never stopped hitting balls 3 times a week. So talk about tennis, why you're so passionate, why there was no great. I wasn't around tennis for a long time, and I kind of fell in love with it all over again, and I've never been more of a fan of it. You didn't even miss much of a beat, especially kind of the more elite you get, I think, the higher likelihood there is that you take a break from it all, right? You get away. That wasn't your journey.
Well, I was fortunate that people were thinking ahead a little bit, as it became. There's a saying that I heard Connie Hawkins, the old basketball player, said it, but maybe it was someone else. John, the older I get, the better I used to be. And unfortunately, that was applying to me as the years went on. And at the end of my first as it turned out, the end of my first marriage, I was like, hey, honey, if I don't win this major this year, which was 1992, I'll let you, because she had just, I might want to act again. And we had 3 kids. So, one of us had to be at home. So I was like, it's not looking too good that I'm going to win one, since I haven't won one in 7 years. So I was sort of thinking that, but then we ended up getting separated and divorced. So that next year was really, really tough. It took the better part of a couple of years to get through that. And because of the sport of tennis, thankfully, it sort of kept me from, because I was in like a pretty low spot. And it kept me going a little bit. And I had opportunities. I mentioned my late great friend, Vitas Gerulaitis, who I grew up, I was 4 years younger then, but he was like the man in New York. And he was a top 4 player, by the way, and won a major. And he did commentary. I remember watching him because I was like, I'm never going to do commentary. That's what, that would be really pathetic if you did commentary. if I played the seniors tour, that would be the most embarrassing thing ever. So anything I said at that time, I'm doing now. But he did something that was different that I noticed as a commentator. He wasn't taking himself too seriously. He had the knowledge, and he was having fun. These guys, act like their shit doesn't stink, these commentators. So, I was like, if I ever do that, I'm going to do it like him. I want to be like that. And so I think I had the right approach in the beginning. It's like, and I was like, just be yourself. That's for better or for worse. Hopefully that will work. And that sort of kept me going for a little bit. And then after that initial year where I was off the tour for that, I'd stopped playing at the end of 92. I was still being asked to play Davis Cup because we won the Davis Cup in 92. And I played with Pete, which was awesome. We played doubles in the semis and finals. And he said he loved me. Pete Sampras, when I won the match, when we won the Davis Cup, he said he loved me. I don't know if he'll admit to that.
We've talked about a lot tonight.
Sampras.
Yeah. A lot.
He hugged me and he said, I love you.
Bullshit.
Yeah. You got to get Pete on and ask him.
That's the biggest upset in tennis history.
It is. So that was, was like that and alone I was interested in, trying to follow up. But I felt like, and, I got lucky. I got a second chance with my second wife, Patty Smythe. And she was like, if you're going to do this, you got to do it right, like play. Like I was playing some events and I was not in great shape and I was losing because of that. And he's like, you got to get in shape and you got to do this. And you got to, in essence, go back to your roots. Because at one point, she had sold millions of records in the 80s, her band. And she had gotten disillusioned because in music, they only play one woman on the radio. It was like her, Pat Benatar, Cyndi Lauper. It was tough to get that as much attention. So she had just gone on a tour with Rod Stewart, and her record had gone platinum, but she didn't seem to like it anymore. So I had this tremendous idea that we should join a band together because I was all gung-ho, and I'm going to bring, and then she looked at me and she said, we should play Wimbledon. So I said to her, I go, you don't even play tennis. And she goes, exactly. Stick to your day job. So I'm going to be playing a little music in a little while over there. So you'll probably see why it's better that I did stick to my day job. But I've sort of found that, I had a great second chance. And I was also lucky enough to sort of fall into certain things that, like I just do the majors when I do the commentary. I think that's what it's all about. And then I can get away from it. I used to play a lot. Obviously, I can't do that anymore. But I did that a long time. I did that, well into my 50s. So I was fortunate that I was able to stick with it. And it's just, it's funny. The more time that goes by, the more you end up loving it.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, you've mentioned Davis Cup a couple of times. You've mentioned that in the last 20 years, you don't get asked about it much.
Not at all.
I've never had this I don't know that I've had this conversation with you before. I've had it with Jim Courier. I've had it with Andre. I haven't had it with Pete, who loves you.
That moment.
92 in Dallas. My mother took me to the final against Switzerland. There was the first day, there were all these cowbells. They were playing Switzerland, which apparently you thought was a great thing at the moment, playing guys from Switzerland. And I remember the second day, and I was blown away. It was unbelievable. I'd never seen that type of crowd, the USA chants. I don't know if I think I just turned 10 or I was not quite 10 at the time, because math and tennis players. But I was there. I was inspired. I hope we don't lose that vehicle for U.S. tennis, or I hope we fill it somewhere.
I think we've lost it already.
Because, I hope there's another avenue anyways.
I hope
because
so. No, I think
I was,
you're right.
I was 10 and it completely blew my mind. I knew I wanted to play tennis because it was fun. And at that moment, that weekend transformed the way that I thought about it into, it would be amazing to actually be there doing that in one way, shape, or form. So thank you for that. It was one of the most formative weekends of my childhood.
Our team was that.
It was the best team that's ever, in my opinion, ever been on a Davis Cup team. It was,
Andre, Jim Courier, and Pete Sampras.
How about having McENROE and Sampras on a team and them not playing singles?
They loved each other.
Is a good way to put it.
Yeah, so that was an awesome experience. It's really really too bad. But I want to thank Andre, by the way, because that was just when I was separated. I was really, I didn't know if I could make that tie, and I spent a week or so with him in Vegas.
Really?
Yeah, just like mentally to try to get there. And I brought my kids and my parents, I brought everybody there because I was really having a tough time in December of 92. So,
what was that?
Andre, thank you for that.
What did that look like? I can't imagine like, you guys sitting around.
Andre is an extremely intelligent person, but he had a quality that's very rare, and that is that most people that don't have had or haven't had kids yet, they don't know how to deal with kids. They're sort of weird with kids. But Andre, my kids loved Andre.
Really?
Oh, he was so good with kids and just knew how to deal with people, and he knew how to deal with me at that time, and he just was there for me. So I don't think I would have played. I was really out of it, and they probably would have won, could have won anyway. Obviously, got Courier and Sampras and Agassi, and they would have thrown in another guy. But that meant a lot to me at that particular time because that's the last Davis Cup match I ever played.
Didn't realize I wasn't done learning about that weekend. That's awesome. Couple more questions, and then we'll let you all get to your cocktails, at least in a more intentional form. A lot of storylines around Jannik Sinner this summer, Iga Swiatek this summer, and it's a weird place in tennis because you feel like you're defending. You're either punish them here or forgiveness here, and it seems like there's no middle ground, no nuance. The thresholds, and my argument is like a threshold argument where Iga Swiatek recently, number one player in the world last couple of years, will finish 2 this year, 5 majors by the age of 23, great player. Tested positive for contaminated supplement. It's been proven what she said was true, but it was in melatonin, which she took when going from Paris to Cincinnati. Took one at 2 o'clock, got a knock on her door. We get out of competition testing, knock on her door at 7 a.m. Anyways, what she had, basically what they said was in it, there was other stuff in it, right? Like anyone who's like gluten person can, if it's mixed together, you can have trace elements of gluten if it's been mixed in the same factory. What we're doing is, in my opinion, and I'm curious, I want one more rip the Band-Aid off opinion before we kind of get on with it. But what I've said on this show is, are we testing for thresholds that have been scientifically proven not to enhance performance? And is that in the sport of tennis best interest? Sinner had 1/1 billionth of a gram of something and it popped. Is it worthwhile, or are we doing ourselves a disservice with the entire process now?
Well, that's a loaded question. We were a little different in my day. We do use performance detracting drugs. Now they use performance enhancing drugs. So what the hell? I don't know enough about it. But it seems like athletes are always looking for that edge. Obviously, legally, we all hope as tennis players and ex-players that none of this is, mounting to anything that actually is happening. But to think it doesn't happen would be an amateur's thought. I think our sport gets tested more than almost any other sport. It's like the Olympics. You get blood tested. As Andy just said, you have to be available 1 hour. You have to say where you're going to be, and people are suspended because they weren't there, and they didn't fail the test. They just weren't there, and they got suspended. Brooksby's the most recent example. And so, as someone who loves to see the sport played at a high level, it would be an absolute shame to think that either one of those two players would be, involved in something like that. Sometimes when you hear the stories, you're like, "What? Mm-hmm. Like, really? Your masseuse had a cut, and they gave it, and then you massage it, and somehow that happened." But I'm sort of on the side of willing to go along with it.
What does that mean?
That I'm going to believe the player.
Okay.
I want to believe the player because, and I don't know, they said at the U.S. Open, they said 1/millionth of something was in his system. I'm not even sure what it was. What is 3 million? So maybe that's a lot. I don't know what 1/millionth is. It sounds like absolutely nothing. But, I don't know what 10.0001 is. So I'm not the right guy to ask. I'm just hopeful that this is something that doesn't plague our sport.
Here's what I think. Like the Sinner thing that you mentioned it's a insane story where the masseuse apparently had a cut, was using something, and that was a banned substance, went into him. And you're going, there's no way that possibly happens. Okay, if the threshold, the head of WADA came out 3 weeks ago, and like, you could walk down the street in New York City and potentially, something could happen. I go, then why the hell are we testing for that
Test
amount?
positive for marijuana.
Yeah, like
if you
honestly,
walk down the street of Manhattan,
seriously, like,
okay.
God forbid you go to a bar there now. Like, I mean, honestly, like, yeah. So that was a knowing laugh. Yeah. I guess what I'm saying is like, in the tribunal, why put ourselves where we're at a tribunal and where the people that actually do know what a billionth of a gram is, and them saying, okay, you tested positive for it, but it has no performance enhancing qualities at that level, then why the hell are we testing for it? Right? Like, why are we making players lie about their whereabouts and, say that, until they go through the process, they have to disappear awkwardly and make up reasons for pulling out of tournaments? I don't know. It feels like it just needs an entire overhaul. And listen, if the majority of the tennis, world says, no, we should do that, great. But we're just putting people in a really rough position where you get a bad melatonin that's out of your system in 7 hours, and, all of a sudden you get tested in hour 5, and you get announced that you're, have doped. It seems extreme. It seems like there's no clarity with the ITIA, WADA, between the two things. Obviously it goes on, but it's just weird because it puts everyone, including yourself, including me, who does, media, in a tough spot. Because if I go, well, that's really unfortunate, I believe her, then it's like, okay, you support, X, Y, and Z, and I don't think that's the case. If it's an anabolic steroid, a matching agent, I will have no sympathy for any penalty.
Is Zambian legal?
You can test positive for like.
No, I'm just
like
wondering because
Tinactin.
I'd be screwed if that was
Right. I can actually.
That was given to me by Davis Cup doctor 40 years ago.
Well, I can say that it probably is fine because I've played more recently and have probably been tested more recently.
You thrown some stuff in my drinks. I'm like, what's my name? And it's this guy was responsible.
That's for
that's
another
for the
day.
next podcast.
Yeah, that's for another podcast. One more question, and then I want to read a little bit more about what you're doing here at Baha Mar. It's something that's just it's a question that I'm just curious about. With the career, which is more than just playing, commentating, you've been kind of a very prominent figure in just pop culture, whether it's you're going to play music later. You're in, Adam Sandler movies. You do cameos in this. Every time someone needs someone in a movie to yell at someone else, it's like, let's call Johnny Mac. Let's do it. So this career that you've carved out kind of in the wake of your playing career, how much of it is just, yeah, that sounds fun, versus how much of it is actually calculated, talked about, strategized with good old Gary over there?
Yeah. Not very calculated, honestly. But I'm a believer. Teddy Roosevelt, ex-president, said something 100 years ago, probably. But it's better to try and lose than not try at all. And one of the things that I did when I stopped playing was to sort of experiment with other things and see, if that was something I'd gravitate towards, as opposed to staying involved in tennis. And I think the full circle is it brought me back to tennis. I had a talk show. I had a game show. The cameos. I was looking to see what else could be out there. That's something that, would bring me a lot of pleasure and make me want to take that amount of time. And as it turned out, it sort of brought me back to tennis. But I'll tell you a quick story. I was the commencement speaker at Stanford last year, which is where I went to college for a year. And, it was an important year, though. I went after I got to the semis of Wimbledon in 1977, and I was 21 in the world when I entered college. So most players wouldn't go to college when they did that. But at any rate, I get this call. My daughter had applied. My youngest daughter is 25. She applied to law school at Stanford, and they rejected her. The next day, the head of, the president of Stanford calls me and said, would you like to be the commencement speaker? I'm like, your timing sucks. But the irony is that the senior presidents who have a fair amount of a role in picking who that would be. By the way, I was the first dropout ever to be the commencement speaker and the first athlete. So in 120 years. So that meant something. But they said, we saw the work you do as a narrator, Never Have I Ever. And I'm like, oh, that's nice. Oh, we'd really like to tell you some stories about Never Have I Ever. Could you tell us a few stories now? And I'm like, these people don't even know I play tennis. So in a way, that journey that I've taken has actually sort of, allowed me to do things that I would have never dreamed of being able to do, such as that, which is pressure in front of, 30,000 people. You don't want to blow a commencement speech these are freshmen in the pandemic. So they had a tough time. So at any rate, these things, just trying different things is something, it's like you always hear when you grow up, you learn more from losing than you do with winning. Well, if that's the case, you have to be able to, and let's face it, the number 40 player in the world has a 500 record or something in tennis for the year. So you're losing quite a bit, and most players are losing more than they're winning. So you better be able to sort of figure out, how to do something that'll become more positive when you've lost. So, those experiences, hopefully, and I think they have made me grow as a person and appreciate what I was able to do well.
Mac, thanks for being here. I want to give a shout out to Baha Mar for having us. That's the reason why most of us are here this weekend. I've been lucky enough to be here for and with my dear friend Mark Knowles. Mark Knowles, Children's Tennis Initiative. He's been doing great work here since, I had like a 1 in front of my age. And is a special person, special friend. This event gets better and better every year. The Baha Mar Tennis Cup, I want to say I've done it 5 or 6 times now. And it just gets better and better. How do we improve what's already great? You bring in people like John McENROE. You start the John McENROE Tennis Center at Baha Mar, which is said will be a game changer for tennis in the Caribbean, which is so important, providing state-of-the-art facilities, innovative programming that cater to players of all levels. Mac, why was this important for you to get involved with?
Well, I've been involved in my own academy in New York for the past dozen years. And what I've noticed over the last 45 years since I've been on the professional circuit is, if anything, it's getting more expensive to do this instead of less expensive, and there's less opportunity. So this seemed like a no-brainer, since most of the people that come to Baha Mar are from New York, which is, a nice connection. And I'm hoping, I don't have any other, I'm not planning on franchising. To me, this is like you need to be at a place and, they hopefully impart some knowledge and, that fire, and just realize that the sport of tennis can change your life for the better, even if you don't become a professional. So that's been my goal and will continue to be the goal the rest of my life. And this just seemed like such a great opportunity for me, just selfishly, because this is a nice place to come visit and bring my family. And also to try to, open the door for people here, and maybe there could be some type of connection between us here and us in New York. So I'm very much looking forward to it.
Listen, thank you for being with us tonight. Huge thank you to Baha Mar Resorts, our dear friend Mark Knowles. We wouldn't be here tonight if he hadn't put an idea into motion a while ago. We love you, Mark. Thank you for having us. Every year. Huge round of applause. I shot a prayer of an email to Gary Swain, who's Johnny Mac's right-hand man. They responded. I said, can you stop by for 10 minutes? He says, hey, we'll do an hour if you'd like. We appreciate you coming on Serve Podcast. JW, thank you. Producer Mike. Sophie, Techie Sean, check a bag next time. This has been Served.